There seem to be two different camps. On one side, we have people that seem to believe that just by accepting all beliefs and all religions, that they're the same. But many of them are just pretending in words, but in actions, they're not really practicing that belief. On the other side, we seem to have a whole other group of people that seem to believe that every path and every religion is different, and there's only one right way, depending on who you ask. So today, we're going to be discussing that there may be a middle ground between the two. We'll also be discussing how truth expresses itself through different languages, cultures, and lives, and how many of them may be more similar than we're ready to admit. Thank you for joining us today. You're listening to the New Ashla Podcast. Hello and welcome to the New Ashla Podcast. I am your host, Justin Gates, joined by my boy wonder over here, Michael Perry.
Hey, fam.
And today we have a special guest, Madhav Nakar. He is a filmmaker, kind of, right? You're dabbling into filmmaking. He's a podcaster. What else do you do? You do lots of things.
Day jobs in cybersecurity, side gig in real estate, but main passion is spirituality.
That's the passion. So, and of course, we talked long before this episode today, and you were telling us about your film that you're making, and I kind of got the sense was that you were visiting people who believe in different religions, different paths, they practice different things, and that somewhere along the way you started noticing something similar, but with these different people that you were talking to.
Yeah, totally. I just honestly, for the last about less than a year, just been obsessed with God, as awkward as that sounds. But I'm like, each religion often claims that like they're the way to God. But if I wasn't born in that culture, I would have never found this. So that kind of never really stuck with me. And so I'm like, what is God? Why do we need God? Does God even exist? Like literally, that's like the biggest question that almost every culture kind of tries to get to.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we in this game? What is going on? And that's kind of been my journey lately. So I've been exploring different paths, different spiritual traditions, and perhaps trying to like just come to my own set of rules that I can follow in my life.
How many different people have you talked to so far on this journey?
Hundreds.
And all of them are different spiritual paths or different religions, or were there a lot of similar ones in there?
So I kind of divide it into two sections.
Mm-hmm.
One is the common person and their beliefs, which I often when I'm on the subway or the train, I'm just strike up a conversation with the person next to me, see what they believe.
Right.
Then the other camp, which is like the very theologically oriented people that are actually reading books and all that. So I kind of divide it into those two camps. And I think that people kind of miss out on the first camp, the common people.
Yeah.
That's where the real spiritual nuggets, the real applicable part of religion actually comes in. And those are the people that I speak to more often, actually.
Would you say a lot of people that come from, like, they have their own spiritual belief system, they're not necessarily a part of religion, have a lot of differing beliefs or more similar beliefs than not?
It's actually more similar. Like, that's the boring answer. That's the more similar thing. So I went to India and often hear about the arguments between the Hindus and the Muslims. So I wanted to find out for myself. And I'm a Hindu. I'm like, I went to a Muslim majority area and I'm like, hey guys, what do you think about Hinduism? I'm a Hindu. Should I be scared to be here? And they were like really nice, really welcoming. They're like, no, there's no need. Everything's one. Everything's kind of the same. And I was like really surprised to hear that because I was expecting some like really like back and forth. And for the common person that I would talk to, the common Muslim or the common Hindu, I didn't get any of that. So it's like a religion is a set of rules that are kind of in a person's brain, but then their heart is sometimes elsewhere. So what I judge by like when people say that I believe in this God, I'm like, okay, sure, maybe you say you believe in it, but how do you live your day-to-day life? And that's the God I see that you really believe in.
Right. Yeah. Because the first camp of folks, they have to put rubber to the road. Those are the ones practicing their beliefs and practicing day to day and interactions with everyone, like a country like ours here in the United States. There, you can't walk down the street without running into, especially in a big city, without running into many different people from very different backgrounds and beliefs. Even in the Christian tradition, there are many different parts and sects to that, for example. So, and everybody is kind of applying that to their lives in the real world, in real society, right? We have to work with each other. We have to shop with each other. We have to do all these things with each other. When you're sheltered in a temple or a church, and that's your profession, that's where you live, it's a whole different perspective, right?
Yeah, totally.
So it seems like your original motive for this was to kind of compare these different traditions. Would you say that you were kind of looking, well, I think you said you were looking for the right one for you, right? Or the right set of beliefs. And as you started doing this work, was there a particular problem that you were trying to solve through this work?
Yeah, it's like I was primarily curiosity, like just
Mm-hmm.
what is God to everybody? That was my initial question.
Mm-hmm.
Then through this, if I had to kind of take away religion and just pure observation, is that what religions generally are trying to do is like increase your level of consciousness. So
Mm-hmm.
if a person's really addicted to some substance or anger issues, these religions are trying to elevate your level of consciousness. For example, you'll notice that every single religion has like this thing where you should fast, right? The Muslims
Mm-hmm.
have it, Ramadan, Hindus have it, Christians have it. And it's
Right.
like, why do all these religions want you to fast? And it's like the answer that I came to is that they want you to realize that your spirit is different from your body. And when you're like in the grasp of your body, you're like prone to making like impulsive decisions. And when you fast, you realize that the spirit is higher than the body. And I'm like, those are the rules that I'm going after, not these silly dogmatic traditions, even though they have their value.
Was there any particular aha moment you had that started you on this path when you started questioning who is God, what is God?
Yeah, like in the beginning, it was before I started this journey, I was like believed in simple morality, which is be good, do good. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, this seems way too simple. So I dug into, especially Hinduism, a lot of the philosophical texts. I have really good Christian friends that actually taught me a lot about Christianity, a few Muslim friends. And I started to go really into the deep theological aspects of it. And through this whole journey, I've come full circle, which is do good and be good. And that's like the essence. You go full circle and you realize that it's actually quite simple, but you have to go through that whole journey. And I'm like, that was my aha moment. I'm like, maybe you don't need to overcomplicate it. And the reason that you have all these complexities is for you to come back to the simple rules, which is just do good and be good. As boring as that sounds.
I feel like that's the journey of life, right? We start off as kids, we're innocent, we're pure, we're light, and then we start being conditioned by experiences, by different situations, by different type of social norms we have to fit in. And as you get into spirituality, it's like now you're peeling away these layers that are conditioning to get back to your authenticity. So that's beautiful because that's exactly what that made me think of.
Yeah. This reminded me of a verse in the Bible, which is that for you to get into heaven, you have to become like a child, something along those lines.
You know,
Nietzsche also said the same thing, which is that you should become childlike because
Yes.
that's where you have almost no arrogance. You're humble, you're curious.
Yep. Christ said that too. Christ. Something you said, Michael, reminded me of an axiom of light. I can't go one show without filling up the axiom of light jar. It's like a cuss jar around here. If I say there's an axiom for that, right?
I know what I'm getting you
Um,
for Christmas next year.
a big jar. But the axiom of light is when we are born, we are soft and flexible. When we die, we are hard and stiff. Stiffness is a consort of death, flexibility a consort of life. The hard and stiff will be broken, and the soft and flexible will prevail. That's what that reminded me of when you said that. Because yes, we must remain curious. We must remain open. We must remain flexible. If we don't, we will break under all the stress, right? So, so what conclusion have you come to thus far regarding the different spiritual paths and the different theologies that you've kind of been exposed to?
I think each one of these religious traditions are like trying to touch on a different aspect of human consciousness.
Mm,
For example, the story of Christ, beautiful story. Take away any religious symbolism, but it's a guy that showed love even till his last moments when he was
hmm
on the cross. You look at Islam and how disciplined they are. They literally have to pray 5 times a day. So
hmm
that's another part of human consciousness. Buddha, literally the whole story of how Buddhism started is how do we overcome suffering? And he has different techniques about going through that. So it's like different aspects of human consciousness that all these paths are trying to get to. And And like honestly, you could just learn from all of them. That's why I call myself a spiritual Hindu and not a Hindu because I'm spiritual before I'm a Hindu.
Right. Were you brought up in that tradition, or is this something you've kind of settled on later on?
No, I was brought up in
Hmm.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
In a spiritual sense, or have you kind of morphed into that? Like, were you very was your upbringing very strict into Buddhism? I mean, Hinduism, very strict. Do all the theological parts, the dogmas and stuff. Was that kind of how you were brought up, and then you've kind of morphed out of that?
Yeah, yeah, very much so. It was like you believe this to be true. I had to like think about, well, they could have these stories in Hinduism, but I don't know if they literally happened or not.
Hmm.
That was a question you weren't allowed to pose.
Right.
Started to pose those types of questions, and yeah, no, it was to explore different faiths to see like do other religions have like an actual account of history. And
Mm.
yeah, it was like a full circle moment when I come back to Hinduism, knowing that maybe it didn't happen or did happen. I don't know, and actually, I don't really care. That's the point. That's the stance I'm at now.
That's kind of the thing that most Christians will point to with Christianity is that there is a 2000 and some odd year unbroken chain of history. Maybe because the Romans were good at keeping records, better than some, I suppose. Um, and maybe it's because 2000 years isn't that long ago compared to Buddhism or Hinduism or all these very much older religions where, the Romans weren't thought of back then. And there was no one really writing stuff down as well as they did. So um, I just have to say that for myself, the historical parts of it, not as big of a deal to me as it would be for some also, because, I'm only going to be alive for 100 years if I'm lucky. 2000 years, I can't even imagine that 2000 years ago or 2000 years of historical accuracy or whatever. So I just, like you, I have to look at things how they are right now and how I meet them where I'm at this moment.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I've been thinking about, which is like there's like several different types of truths. Like there's a literal truth, and
Hmm.
there's the metaphorical truth. Like, are we gonna dismiss all of Shakespeare's work because it didn't happen literally? I think, in fact, Shakespeare's work is even more valuable because it points to some sort of underlying structure of human consciousness that he's gaining through these stories. And I
Hmm.
think that that's even more valuable than dissecting whether this is literally true or not.
Well, that's such a great example because there is so much in the stories told through the ages of mankind. I think of Joseph Campbell. Are you familiar with Joseph Campbell?
Heard of him.
So he was the one who came up with the concept of the hero's journey, which is prevalent in all storytelling. And I'm probably going to butcher this, but it's someone embarks on it, or someone lives a comfortable life, they're doing their normal thing, and then something chaotic happens and they're forced to leave their home. And then when they leave their home, they end up going through all this hardship and development of the character, and then they're forced to fight the dragon at the end of the story and overcome it, return reborn. And it's just this theme that's played out in mythology and all the historical stories. I definitely recommend checking out stuff Joseph Campbell came out with because he's now like the godfather of storytelling.
Yeah, that's a great point. In the beginning, I was like, I want to remove all the stories so I could just get to the philosophical part of it.
Hmm.
When I did that, and I just found that really dry. Philosophy is so dry
It
without the
is.
stories. The stories just encapsulate it in such a beautiful way that it sticks with you more than the philosophical axioms.
Yeah.
That's why there's more believers than there are philosophers in the world. Not a lot of true Stoics out there because Stoicism is very, very difficult to stick with because it is very dry.
Yeah.
I remember the first
So
time reading the Meditations.
yeah, I mean, and Marcus Aurelius's Meditations is one of the most important things a person can read. But you got to come at it from, you know, a particular place. You have to not let it be so dry and so serious.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's one of the books that is, I mean, of course, it's been translated into different languages and stuff, but it's pretty much the same as it was when he wrote them, and it's lived all this time. So out of all the different paths and religions that you've come across in your work thus far, what were some of your highlights, some of your favorite things that you learned?
Some of my favorite things, like a lot of the Buddhist tradition is very interesting. For example, the way they actually go about suffering is actually really practical. So, for example, Buddha says that there's two types of suffering. One where you just get, let's say you get hit by an arrow, that's going to hurt. But
Hmm.
then let's say a couple of days down the line, you think about the event of you getting hit by the arrow, that's going to also produce additional suffering. So there's two types of suffering. One, the actual suffering, and then the suffering of the suffering. And he says that the first one is just a byproduct of you living life. But the second one, where you hold on to that memory of suffering, is unneeded. So it's like I didn't even think about it, suffering like that. Like there's parts of suffering that you could just let go. So that was one beautiful thing I picked up from Buddhism. Then the stories of Christ from Christianity is also like it just sticks with you. It hits you in the heart.
Hmm.
There's also the poetry from the Sufi tradition as a part of the sect of the Islam, which
Hmm.
is also very spiritually elevating. And then when you read a lot of these, it's like they're poetic and it's like they're ineffable. You know, like language kind of breaks down, and that's where I think the meats and bones are.
So after speaking to so many folks and these so many different ways that they approach spirituality and religion, I suppose, have you found that some paths or some religions are better for others, for people at maybe even different stages of their life? Have you found people that transition from for example, a very strict dogmatic view of a religion, and then over time they have softened and become flexible enough where they still believe, but they've kind of shed much of the dogma? Have you encountered that?
Partly, yes, but the thing with I think religion and spirituality is that it tries to answer the biggest question, God, who created us and all that. And having your mind changed about something as big as that is like really like ground shaking. So I actually didn't come across many people that have like seriously like changed their beliefs. And I think that oftentimes if for example, had a Christian friend say that me worshiping Krishna, who is a Hindu deity, is demonic because it doesn't point to the Christian God.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, on the surface, it seems like a silly statement, but I'm like, it might actually help him in his spiritual practice because it gives him that conviction to believe that his God is right. And when you have that conviction, like, no, my God is right, it increases your devotion. And I'm like, maybe for him in his spiritual practice, that's a useful lie to believe in. And that not everybody needs their worldview shaken up. Sometimes it's just good to follow the narrow and straight path that gets you there. So actually, most people I didn't find that I really challenged their worldviews.
Have you ever seen the documentary Samadhi? Especially with the work you're doing. It's on YouTube. It's a 3-part series. It is one of the most fascinating, real, not religious, but spiritual videos I've ever seen. And it talks about how each religion is a channel to get to this higher consciousness and through our experiences in life. But check out that video. It is amazing. I highly recommend it.
You know, something you said about your friend, um, and I've encountered this a lot over the years. I don't know, I don't know how much older I am than you, but I've been doing this kind of search, this living this mystical existence for a long time. And much like you and everyone else, my goal is to connect to God, right? And there doesn't seem to be one clear path to that. But I will tell you, I've seen this many times, and I've lost many friends and family and stuff over this one sticking point, and that is passion is good, right? Passion for something, passion for your beliefs, passion for the things you love is good until that passion stops being allowed to be questioned. When passion can't be questioned anymore, then it becomes self-righteousness. And self-righteousness is a cancer to virtue, right? I'm and I know I'm going to catch some crap for this, but there's lots of things I say, Michael, that I'm going to catch crap for. So I don't really care that much about it. If it's true, it's true. But I'm willing to wager that many of the spiritual masters from long ago all had something in common, and that was they 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 didn't allow their passions to turn into self-righteousness. You know, I don't know a lot about many of them. I don't know a lot about Muhammad, for example. I do know enough, a surface level, to kind of understand. But it just seems to me when spiritual leaders, spiritual masters, they modeled behavior that didn't equate to this level of self-righteousness that we see, because the dogma didn't exist yet. All the rest of us created that dogma, right? So we have to, it's well and good to be passionate and to love. But when we stop allowing that to be questioned, then we start to find ourselves in some dangerous territory.
Yeah, there's a story in the Bible that kind of points to exactly what you're saying. So there's the Pharisees, and then Christ comes, and the Pharisees are doubting that Christ is actually a prophet. They're like looking in their books. They're like, this book says one thing, and then this person is a different thing. We're gonna believe the book and not this person. So then
Mm-hmm.
Christ comes to the congregation, and while the Pharisees are questioning his actual authenticity of him being a prophet, prostitute comes in and comes running to Christ's feet. So it's a beautiful anecdote to see how the simple common man can recognize divinity more faster than these so-called theologians that are stuck in their books.
Mm-hmm.
It's because when you know a lot about theology, when you understand the nitty-gritty details, it gives you that level of arrogance because of your intellect that takes you away from the truth. Because truth, you really can't find it through the intellect. The intellect is a nice tool, but the spiritual life is more than the intellect. The intellect can't override your spiritual truth.
No, because all your thoughts go through the filter of your body first. Your emotions, your imperfections, which we all have, right, Michael? The
Yeah.
body knows first, and then we think about it through those filters.
Yeah, it's such a nice thing you brought up the body, because a lot of religions don't really, like, from my experience, like, consider the body. Like, the body is really spiritual. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it holds a lot of trauma. Like, the body keeps the score by Dr. Koch.
Yep.
It literally shows like your brain development is impacted by the body, and like your it's crazy to see, like, basic psychological development should be a part of spiritual practice. We don't see that.
Michael just led us through a discussion a few shows ago, Michael, and you can jump on this. He led us through a discussion a few shows ago about how our thoughts go through that those colored lenses of the emotional energy the and the nervous system first, right, Michael?
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of how our emotions will dye our thoughts. And so many of us are disconnected from the body itself. Have you ever read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle?
But I know
He
it.
talks about how we have the ego and we have another entity called the pain body. And the goal of these two things is for convince us to identify with them. And so when the body gets activated, it's the ego or it is the pain body trying to pull your thoughts into its identity. And so when we separate it, when we can start feeling our feelings instead of articulating them and trying to rationalize them, we can end up having clear thoughts, because the minute our mind touches our emotions, it's like dye to water, and our thoughts will be dyed the color of whatever feeling is coming up.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's where a lot of the yogic sciences in the Eastern tradition comes in. They say that we have like three parts, which is the body, the mind, and then the soul. But for us to get to the soul, we first have to align the body and the mind. That's why you see some like really difficult yogic poses. It's for you to train your body, which then helps you train your mind, which gets you to the soul.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. Wow.
That's a perfect segue, because I was just going to ask you next, how important is discipline for people who travel these theologies, these spiritual paths? How big of a role is discipline that you've seen in all of them, for those who are super devout versus kind of just agnostic, maybe just kind of a passing belief?
Yeah, that's one thing I really learned from Islam is the amount of discipline they have. Prayer 5 times a day. And they're like, it doesn't matter whether you feel like doing it or not. Your prayer itself, the act itself, is your connection to God. Whether you feel like it or not, you do it. And that, even though I would say maybe I'm like leaning towards the agnostic side of how we articulate what God is, consciousness is, that group I found doesn't have the discipline that a lot of these religious folks do. And I'm like, we need to bring in discipline back. Not just like discipline of the way that you do your rituals, but also discipline of the body, discipline of the mind. Um,
Well, I think that's one of the fail safes for a lot of the modern day, a lot of the religions we have, especially in the U.S., like Christianity and Catholicism, it's all about forgiveness, which is we are forgiven for our sins, we can wash, repeat, which I think forgiveness is so important throughout so many religions because forgiveness for others, for ourselves, is necessary for spiritual development. But when we remove the blocks to allow ourselves to hold ourselves to that moral standard, it can be so detrimental to our development.
Yeah.
Well, that's how we heal across ourselves too, Michael. Our whole self, the mind, the body, the spirit, and the heart, the emotions. Forgiveness is at the center of all of that. Forgiveness is super important. It's really, really one of the only ways. I mean, there are some blocks that we have, and all of us get these naturally. And it's more important for us to learn to forgive than it is to receive forgiveness. Because I mean, if we can't learn to authentically forgive ourselves and others, how could we ever expect to receive that level of forgiveness from God or from, whoever, whatever you believe in? But I think there has to be, I mean, forgiveness is at the center of many of these, just more kind of more outspoken about it, like Christianity, it's kind of the whole point, right? Forgiveness of sin. So have you come across any kind of, and I'm going to try to word this very carefully because I'm not trying to offend anybody out here, but there do seem to be spiritual practices and theologies or different sects of theology that has really heavy dogma that doesn't seem to work well. Why do you think, I guess I first should ask you, have you come across kind of these shallow versions of these things where it just failed the people? And if so, why do you think that is?
So I think as generally the more dogmatic a religion is, the more likely it is to fail quickly. And so when in my exploration, I explored the biggest religions. So they existed for these amount of years they're doing something right, right? Even if you think about the one that you don't like, they're doing something right for them to exist for this long. But now the dogmatic, I realized that when I went through some of for example, you read the Quran and there's a lot of things that to me didn't make sense. And when I would speak to Muslims, they themselves didn't know that was in the Quran. So effectively, even though they say they believe in the Quran, their actions are actually elsewhere. So it's interesting to see what the set of rules are and what the general populace of that religion actually believe. And sometimes they're at crosses. That's what I generally noticed is that they might reserve that dogma for the book itself, but in their actual day-to-day life, they haven't really practiced that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there are philosophies out there. I won't name anything, but there are philosophies out there, and there seem to be spiritual traditions that have been distilled and watered down, removed from thousands of years ago, that are just not worth the paper the stuff's printed on, because people can't actually practice these things, right? It almost to me reminds me, and these kinds of watered down philosophies and watered down spiritual paths that did come from maybe one of the big 3 or 4 or 5, but by the time they got distilled down, they're just not worth following because they don't have a way. There's no path to follow. There's no path forward. And people have commercialized a lot of these things too. I know we're going to catch some crap, Michael, for this, but much of the New Age movement is just a bunch of watered down bullcrap, just to sell somebody by the pound and make a profit off of them, right? I know you're not supposed to talk bad about New Age. You're not supposed to, but I do. I did.
I think that's exactly what the Church of Scientology is, right? Which is they sell
Yeah.
memberships, get you closer to God.
Yeah, via spaceship. And look, I'm this is going to sound like I'm picking on Mormons right now, but I'm not. But just today, when I went down the street to the store, I had a couple of kids ask if I wanted to talk about Jesus today with them. And I just didn't have the patience this morning, because the Jesus that they understand, the path to Jesus that they understand, is completely different from the one that I've come to discover in my investigations over the years. I mean, not the things I was taught in Sunday school or by going to church, through my investigations, much like the work you're doing. It's a whole different Jesus that I have come to know, and I just didn't have the patience I really didn't feel like debating it, because it's okay that they do their thing and I do mine, We don't have to fight it out. You know what I mean? But this
Yeah.
is, I have a question for you about paradox, because paradox, depending on the philosophy or the path, paradox seems to be kind of either yes, paradoxes exist, no, they don't. Where do you kind of stand on paradoxes? Can two things be two seemingly contradictory things or beliefs be true at the same time?
I I think 100% because the paradox lives in the realm of logic and spirituality transcends logic for me as
Mm,
investigation. And like one of the biggest paradoxical beliefs that many Hindus will have, which is that God has a form or God doesn't have a form. And they believe both of them to be this equal. Like God has a form and it doesn't. But how can both of them be true? And
right.
they say, well, it's beyond. We see form through our eyes and through this, but the God is beyond all of that. It's like the soul is covered by our impressions. And when you collapse that, then you'll see that these paradoxes actually don't really exist. It's just our logical thinking mind that wants us to believe that they exist.
Yeah. I remember when I first started getting into spirituality and I started trying to conceptualize God as more than just someone up in the clouds looking down at everybody and being all knowing. It started becoming more of an entity that is time and space itself, that it is existence of all things around me, even rocks without souls, it's everything.
Yeah, yeah, it's it's such a hard thing for me, which is that I agree with how you just encapsulated God, but then it's like, how do I have a personal relationship with something that's formless, that transcends time? Like I can't have that personal relationship. One of the poets in the Eastern tradition says, what happens when God comes in front of you and Guru comes in front of you? Who are you going to bow down to first, God or Guru? And he says, I'm going to bow down to Guru first because Guru is the one who showed me the path to God. So I found that beautiful because if you relegate God to an abstract notion, like how do you have that personal relationship? And that's where like the human essence of people that embodied what it means to have a God essence is like revered so highly. For example, Christ, Buddha, like the God and Guru is at the same pedestal at that point.
I know that's a great analogy. And like thinking about that question, I mean, I think it comes back to your original statement, the greatest lesson you've learned on this journey, and that's do good, be good. Like, with us being connected to all things, the only way we can ripple in accordance with God is to do the greatest good we can while we're here, right? To have the greatest impact, to leave the ripples we're supposed to.
Right. And have fun with it.
And have
Hmm.
fun with it. Yes. Yes.
That's where a lot of the contention comes in, though, because there are beliefs that there are living gods or the living God and gods that aren't alive anymore, right? You know, like the Norse gods, for example. We don't see them anywhere, but people believe that that God is alive, is living, that Jesus proved that, right? That's also another point of contention, whether Jesus is a form of God or just a prophet. That's where the Muslims and the Christians kind of argue a lot, because they believe that Christ was miraculous and was a prophet, and they don't believe that he was God in human form. And I've heard Christians, and I'm not picking on you guys. This is where I come from, right? This is my background. I was born in a Christian culture, like most of us were here. But a lot of them will say, well, I worship God the Father because God the Father is alive and the other gods are dead, right? Which is neither here nor there. It's not, there's no way for me to know for one way or the other, right? I don't know enough about Hinduism, for example, to know if those gods are alive or they're dead. Doesn't really matter to me, because at the end of the day, this is, like you said, this is about, for me, it's about that relationship that I build with the ineffable, right? With this creator, no matter what they look like, no matter what they say, no matter what they do. I think that they'll be okay with my mispronunciation of their title or their status. I think they're probably above such things, whereas we're quite not there yet, right? We still find those things to be important to us. I don't think there's a bunch of gods up there fighting it out. I think we're the ones fighting it out here. And whether there's one God or many versions of that, I don't think they trouble themselves, or he or she troubles themselves with the squabbles of puny man.
Yeah, that's a. I recently uploaded a Instagram reel where I said that I think in spiritual life you should have no faith. Like people say that we should have faith and all that. I'm like, well, it's about testing it. Can you verify it? I won't believe in something I can't verify. So the question becomes then, how do you verify like God exists? Well, then you live the teachings that Christ propagated, Buddha propagated, any of these prophets propagated, and you see how phenomenologically your life changes. If your life changes for the better, not materially, spiritually, you're spiritually becoming rich. It's true. That's how I categorize as true. And like I actually find faith as like a as lazy thinking. Like it's just easy to have faith, but I'm like you should verify it. And if you come to the conclusion that the one of the Norse god is true for you because it elevated your consciousness, then who am I to say that that's wrong?
Right. So that would be my question to you. Who is right? Who is wrong, right? Which one works, which one doesn't, right? That seems to be the debate amongst enthusiastic believers.
Yeah, no, I went to a lot of Hindu temples in my time in India, and I was asking that exact question. Like, there's so many. Who do I believe in? And they were like, well, at a certain level, what does a human want? They want love, they want peace. For the most part, that's what they want. Now, the way that they think that they might get that is probably wrong. Like some people might think that becoming rich might make them happy, and then it turns out it really doesn't. Those are like eternal wisdom truths. But anyways, the point that most people want is love. They want all that. And if you could find the strategy that could give you the most optimal amount of love, no matter in what situation you're in, no matter if you're being hung on the cross as your final act, and if you still find love in that gruesome amount of suffering, you won. Like that's you won life.
Hmm.
I remember when I was going through one of the darkest periods in my life, and the one thing I wanted to hold on to is like, I know I had this light about me that I cared about so much in life. Even though I was screwed over by people, I was going through things that no one should have to go through. It was like, I don't want to lose that light. I don't want to lose my love for humanity because that's what it is. I don't want to taint my perception and scorn the world for other because of other people. And I think you're absolutely right that in suffering, I have this phrase where it's like we either get bitter or we get better. And it's holding on to the love is what carries people through that.
Yeah, that's actually beautiful. I don't know if you guys noticed, like some of the most wisest and like the most spiritual people that you actually respect have gone through like terrible backgrounds. Like they had the most amount of sufferings, and it's like the kind of theory that I'm coming to is like suffering is like a purification process. Kind of breaks your worldview, breaks you open, and then suddenly the things that you thought would give you love and happiness aren't there, or they're not doing that anymore, and you have to find that internally. And when you find that internally, it becomes like you opened a fountain of love that was already within you that suffering taught you.
It's the unforgiving process of alchemy. We are not built, we're, I'll put it like this. Those of us who we would consider the best among us, spiritually, physically, mentally, the best of the best, they got there because they put themselves, or they were put through the forge, right? Weapons are not the sharpest, strongest, most beautiful weapons are made in a forge. The strongest shields are made in a forge, made from trees that withstood hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of storms and abuse, heat and pressure, right? And it's when we choose. Now, we all go through suffering. We all go through traumas. We all go through these things. And much of that is done without our even knowing. We don't even remember some of this stuff. And depends on who you ask, and I think this is a very distinct possibility from other lifetimes ago, perhaps. But the body remembers. The body always remembers, Michael, right? Something Michael says all the time. Yeah. The body remembers. And we have to be put through this forge, through this process. We must be refined through alchemy, and that alchemy for us is this meat grinder, man. It just through suffering. Michael said this before, and I agree with him, that suffering is a necessary part of our evolution, right? It's where our spiritual self meets our survival self. It's where we are refined through the trials of life. And nobody gets through it without bumps and bruises and scrapes and scars. It's just when we learn to surrender to that process of alchemy, we learn to surrender to that, to understand and give it to God, as they say, because we don't always know the best way forward.
Yeah, that's That's one other thing that religion does beautifully, which is that it kind of romanticizes suffering.
Hmm.
But like almost it's like God is testing you. You're God's
Right.
chosen ones. That's why you're suffering.
Yeah.
Just flips it. That's why like even though maybe I'm like spiritually agnostic, having that personal relationship with Krishna, for example, is like he's got my back. I don't have to worry about it. And that narrative just keeps that suffering like intact.
Yeah. I've come to the conclusion after all these many years that I don't know. I don't know. Right? I'm happy to admit that I don't know for sure. Um, when Michael when Michael became my student and was apprenticing with me, he had asked me some big questions about God and about creation, about these things. I said, well, I have some working theories, and my theories are always in play. They're always being tested and tested and tested, right? But the short answer, Michael, is I don't know. I just don't know for sure, right? And that's an honest answer. I think I have more respect for people when they tell me, well, this is what I think might have happened, or this is what I think. And as long as those ideals are still growing and they're still being shaped as the person grows, because we can only meet ourselves where we are in the moment, right? I think that's the most honest thing. And I think that's where we're closest to God, as it were. I have to ask, and I'll ask you guys this question. Something that I ponder quite often is it possible that there was a creating force, right? That created everything that we have known, everything that we experience, everything around us, down to the very tiniest molecule, that we then created avatars to try and understand that. That's where all these different gods and these different deities and all these different big G's and little G's, right, come from. What do you guys think?
I'll let you go first, Michael.
All right, I won't fight you. I mean, so even Christianity talks about this, right? The Holy Trinity. You have God, Christ, and the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit resides in all of us. And I truly believe that we are all essence of God being pushed into this third dimensional plane, and we're all just a different perspective of God. It's God witnessing himself through billions and billions of people. And whether he's evolving or just witnessing, I don't know. But I do believe that we are vessels of God on this plane, whether it's to create a better world or to just understand ourselves better. That is my working theory.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to this one, mainly because it provides no practical anything insightful for me. Like, but it's like if a bunch of horses had to come up with their concept of God, they would
Mhm.
probably pick like a horse god.
Right.
Same thing with humans, but I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, like, where did this entire existing come? And there has to be a creative force. If you wrap it around a human form, and if that gets too closer, I only care about practicality, to be honest.
Right. Right. That's an honest answer. There's no right or wrong answers here. You have to meet the questions where you're at, right?
Yeah.
And I don't pretend to know. I don't. I think, my best guess is that there is a creative force, and that everything is too precise to not have been created, right? If gravity is just a little tiny bit off, we all get flung off into space endlessly. Everything everything seems to have been created so precisely that it almost seems impossible for it not to have been created. Now, someone out there might be asking me, well, do you care who or what or whatever it was that created us? I absolutely do not care. That part's not important to me. Much like you, I think you and I kind of think the same way about this. I don't care about that part. I care about the part that I can play in it, right? Because I am one tiny drop in the ocean of humanity. And so I just have to worry about my part of it, my part in it. Am I alleviating suffering for myself and others around me? Or am I perpetuating that suffering? Am I creating discourse, and am I creating dissonance because somebody looks different than me, or somebody prays different than me, or somebody has a different culture than me? Or am I just accepting and surrendering the fact that we were all created, point blank, period, right? I think it's much easier to, if we just worry about our part of it, it's more manageable to contribute to the greater good of the world than it is to worry about things that our tiny little minds can barely grasp anyway.
Random question for both of y'all. Have you done psychedelics?
Yes.
I asked because it kind of just changes your whole perception of reality. If
I
you do
will
it.
say, I will say, and I'll say this very carefully because of my profession. Under the supervision of a doctor, I have done microdosing of psilocybin. Sorry, that's the only.
Yeah, yeah. So I was speaking to someone and they kind of compared suffering and psychedelics together. And the
Mm,
reason is that you think that you're living this life, but then both of them kind of break it. Suffering breaks it in its own way. Psychedelics also breaks it in its own way. And it shows
mhm,
you like reality that you think that you're living isn't actually reality.
right.
And I think like a lot of the answers where a lot of the questions where we obsess about like creation, like how did we come from, and those questions just evaporate in those kind of elevated states of consciousness. They stop
Yeah.
mattering.
hmm I will say, I'm not against the use of psychedelics, especially under controlled conditions where people can be safe. And nowadays, there's a lot of both spiritual evidence and scientific evidence that psychedelics actually do heal traumas and the maladies of the mind and the maladies of the body. And I'm happy that we've finally gotten out of the whole idea that all of this stuff is bad for us. I think anything to the extreme is bad for us, but a lot of headway's been made lately. People are literally being healed from PTSD, severe PTSD from 1 or 2 sessions under the care of a doctor, for example, using psilocybin. Shamans and spiritual people have been using psychedelics for thousands and tens and hundreds of thousands of years. And here we are still. So, I mean, that's proof enough for me, right? Do people abuse things? Of course they do. We should not abuse anything, but
Yeah,
I
and
think
like
there's,
the molecule that a lot of these mushrooms produce, DMT, you could do that naturally through meditation. Obviously, it's going to take some more time, but
Yeah.
that's
yeah.
yeah, that's
Well,
where like
I was going to say that I did go through a series of microdosing psilocybin, and for me, because I've been meditating for 25 plus years now, it didn't give me much. It didn't give me a different effect. It didn't give me any kind of effect that I didn't already enjoy from meditation. So, but that doesn't mean meditation is the best. I'll never say that any one thing is the best simply because it depends on the individual. Just like not one diet will works for everyone. Everybody has to understand what their body needs. For example, meditation can be harmful to people under psychosis. For example, right? If you do this strict Zen void meditation type stuff, the really traditional stuff, and you're not in a good space here, and your nervous system's not in a good space, it can really wreck you and remove years of therapy, remove years of positive growth. So not everything is best, right? When I started mentoring Michael, it was like, we had these discussions about, what meditation is the best, Justin? I don't know. I know which ones are best for me. Here's like 20 that you can try. If none of
Yep.
these work for you or they cause you harm, whatever, come back to me and we'll find something that works for you. It doesn't even have to be meditation, right? Maybe for you, it's better that you just write stuff down. Maybe that's your meditation, right? So I think, especially in the West, and you could speak to this because you've been kind of studying both sides of the earth here. In the West, we tend to get fixated on the right way or the only way or the best way or whatever.
yeah, it's like having a spiritual toolbox.
Yes.
You pick the tool that you need, and you don't need a hammer the whole time. You don't need to meditate the whole time. That's actually one of the uh, in one of these stories of Hinduism, the guy's like, "Yo, what if I just meditate in a cave?" And then God comes to him and be like, "No, you can't do that. You have to fight this war because that's your duty in this life."
Mm.
There's different tools for different spiritual practices. That's why I'm like, explore every faith and pick up everything that you want to pick up and almost create your own religion if you want.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think we're in a day and age where that's becoming very popular. I think one of the things Justin was talking about earlier is really important when it comes to a lot of the new age stuff, because a lot of people might have that one good experience with something traumatic they went through that helped them overcome it, and then they go to market that, but they try to sell it as this will fix everything in your life. And I think that there is nothing wrong with building your own understanding of God, of faith, of but we must be discerning on when we are placating to avoidance or trying to avoid or trying to we're
Bypass.
trying to fast track it. What'd you say?
Bypass.
Yeah,
When we
bypass.
use when we use philosophy and spirituality to bypass the healing process. To touch upon something you said earlier about, how suffering is a part of life, but it helps us feel better knowing that our God or God has our back and we're being tested. But we always got to remember not to use that as a way to bypass the necessary healing, because when we get stuck in subconscious, when we get stuck back there and we get blocks, we just grow in the shadow if we're not facing it, just growing it. And that just perpetuates that belief that paradoxes can't exist, which in truth we know they do. We know they do, because as you said, and you said it beautifully, that's going to be a tagline for the show, is that spirituality transcends those things. Because the truth is, obviously, these two things can exist at the same time. Life and death, it literally exist at the same time right now, right? So, but we got to be careful not to allow bypassing, because that's what a lot of people do. Michael said it. They will do bad all week and then go get forgiven on Sunday or whatever, and then back to the same old crap. They're not trying to grow or get better. So I was going to ask you a question, and I'll wait for Michael to get back, because I kind of want him to touch upon this too.
Yeah, this I like this spiritual bypassing. It's like if you yeah, I asked my Christian friends something, and it's like come to Christ, solution for everything. I'm like, that it sounds nice, but then there's like doesn't really address the core issues, and that's where like I really the seven chakras. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
seven energy
Yep.
centers. So
Yep.
like if you have a overthinking problem, you focus on the third eye and how to calm it down. And I'm like, that provides much more practical use than come to Christ.
Yeah. Yeah. We we do bridges to everything. Everything has a bridge to each thing. But there's somebody out there, at least one, probably more, that's going to say, well, that's very undisciplined. You can't you can't just pick and choose what you want to believe in, right? You can't take one from this and one from that and make a fruit salad of all the different religions and spirituality, because then if you do that, then you're not being faithful to those things. What would you say to somebody who would say to you that that's a very, in other words, a lot of people would say that you must meet the path where the path is from where you are, and not change the path to meet you. They would say that that creates um, a lazy way to practice spirituality, because you're bypassing the things you don't want to have to go through. What would you say to them?
Well, to the response where you shouldn't pick stuff. Well, I disagree because if you don't pick stuff, you're believing a book which did it for you. So it's like, which one do you want? Do you want to find your own path, or do you want to believe a book? And I don't think either one of them is bad. I
Right.
think believing like the Bible is true and it's a beautiful thing. You should believe that. But also, if you find like real tools in the yogic tradition, you should definitely imbibe that in your path. And now the question is like, well, how do you know that you're not just falling into the trap of your sensory pleasures by just believing in something that's convenient or not? And I
Hmm.
think my answer might just sound blasphemous, which is like try it out, right? Like try if you think that money is going to make you happy in life, try to make as much money as possible. And then you realize throughout that process that maybe that wasn't. And I think that people need to learn the hard lessons the hard way. Not every lesson comes the easy way. And if you learn the lesson the hard way, especially in spiritual life, it sticks with you in a way that you just reading a book doesn't really teach you. Like think about how many beautiful wisdom truths are in the Bible. People read it, still do it the mistakes, and then they're like, The book was right. I'm like, you could do the same thing in your life.
There's an
Well
axiom for
said.
that, Michael.
What's that axiom, Justin?
Truth has no regard for popularity. Truth
Mhm.
has no regard for popularity. Because the truth is, we are human beings. We're complex. We have more infinite layers to us. Most of those we don't even understand or even can see in ourselves, let alone in somebody else. So it's very disingenuous for me to say, bro, you're wrong. You're wrong. You just need this. Everything's good. Right? It's very disingenuous because what I'm not honoring the human being that your spirit is inhabiting right now. Right? So if I want to be as close to the foundational truths of that, most of these, what I would call paths of light that they share, if I want to respect that foundational truth or these foundational truths, because they all do carry some foundational truths, then I have to just respect the fact that you are a human being. You're a spirit inside of a human being. And I don't care what created that. I don't care about defining that. But I have to respect that you are a living, breathing being. And then we go from there. That's where we start, right? We go from there. Because all the nuances, that's all human stuff. That's lower than spirit, right? All day today I was watching, I was working on my new book, and I was working on podcast. I was working on just a lot of different things, and I kept seeing these on social media about everybody's trying to kill the ego. Michael and I have done many shows about this, and we've begged them, stop trying to kill your ego. Stop, stop, stop. They want to, but I could say to them, hey, you're a dumbass. Don't try to kill your ego. Or I could say, listen, respectfully, if you try to kill your ego, you're just going to increase your suffering. You're going to grow the shadow, the dark side of yourself, right? And you think you can transcend ego, then you just get spiritual ego, which is almost worse than human ego, right? But all of these things, it's been my experience, all these things have enough foundational truths that we should all be able to get along and sit down and talk to each other about these things. The differences and the nuances between, those are all human things. They're not respective to creation.
Yeah. To the ego point, I was meditating and I had a little bit of an insight, which is if you just pull back and look at your awareness, there's a couple different parts of you that is going on, right? There's the mind that's running with thoughts, there's the body that feels sensations, there's the emotions. And I had this flash of insight, and they were all just separated. But it was some mechanism that was tying it all together into a captivating narrative of this is a human being going through life. But when you separate them, you realize that the body is separate, the minds are separate, the ego is separate, and they're all just tools that are helping you navigate this entire universe that let you see out of your eyes. When you're trying to kill your ego, but that's just an inherent part of your human existence. You killing your ego just doesn't do anything. Wanting to kill your body because it hurts sometimes when somebody punches it. It's
Right.
like it's like different parts of your awareness. Sorry, I just had to share that little insight.
No,
No,
that was
that's
beautiful.
yeah, that's true. I would call that a truth, right? It's a fundamental truth of existence. We can't destroy the parts we don't like and expect to be whole.
Yeah, yeah. There's a beautiful saying in Buddhism, which is that they try to go for enlightenment. Is that before you go for enlightenment, you're gonna have to chop wood and carry water, and after enlightenment, you're gonna have to chop wood and carry water. Nothing changes.
No, 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 just the amount of your suffering because you have learned acceptance. You have surrendered in a way.
Yeah.
One thing I want to touch on, we were talking about this a little bit ago, but I think it's really important, especially to the work you're doing. And it's when it comes to picking spirituality, different things that fit our understanding of the way the universe works. I'm a big believer in schemas and how we all operate from our own narratives, our own understanding of how the world works and how we fit into the world. And so I think it's so important for people to really cultivate their own understanding of God, of spirituality, and and try these different things. I love how you said, do it, and then if it doesn't work out, you learn the lesson because we need to challenge our schemas. But one of the things that makes religion so difficult is it's so rigid in its approach to teaching. And it works because it does have the important lessons we need to embody. But there is so much importance in us being able to open our understanding, to be open to the information that's out there and to challenge our own beliefs, because through that, we can begin fitting puzzle pieces that maybe didn't fit for these people, but we put it into our puzzle and it fits right in and gives us a greater picture. And I wanted to make sure I touched on that before we moved any further past that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful point. You notice that every religion has like a cosmological map.
Mm-hmm.
The Christians believe in heaven or hell. The Hindus believe in reincarnation. You can't really test either one of them, but it's like just give you a map, like a video game has a map. They give you a map, and it's like you just insert yourself in that universe, and like now suddenly you have purpose, you have meaning, and yeah, that reminded me of that.
But at the same time, that doesn't work for people sometimes. There's a whole group of people where that just does not work, and they fall apart, and the weight of that stuff collapses upon them, and then they're virtually lost, spiritually lost, right? What was I going to say? I just interviewed a guy named Brent, and he does work in consciousness, in the unconsciousness. He is a classically trained engineer, very, very logical, very, this is how things are done. This is how life and physics and everything are mapped out. And he said, we were talking, I kind of switched the conversation from his work to the Bible. And he said something that I was like, I had not considered that, but it makes sense that he had to grow spiritually without the Bible to understand the Bible better, right? So as we evolve through these different understandings, we start to meet these things as from where we are, from these different points along our path. And this is why, again, I come back to, it's very difficult for me to say, this is the one true way. This is not the true way. We must fight about this. We must, and people kill each other over it, unfortunately. But just like everything I teach, everything I do, all the axioms of light, they will meet you differently as you progress along your path. And notice I said your path, right? It's not the path or not this path, but your path, because we all, again, come at this from different starting points along. Imagine it being a racetrack, right? We have the Olympics going on right now. I know this is the Winter Olympics, but imagine we have the track, right? We all had those in school and we would race each other around. But imagine how that race would look if we all got to start at different points along the track. Well, of course, someone's going to win if they only have a few steps left, right? So the track meets us where we're at. If it was a race, then it would be unfair. But my point is, all of these things tend to meet us at different points along the way. I look at the Bible now and I read it way differently. I understand it way differently because I had to grow and integrate other understandings first, which again, I don't know how. I can't logically understand how people can get hung up on this is the only way. This is the only way, because that's the only way for you right now, where you're at.
Yeah, this reminded me of the question of evil, and the Abrahamic definition is to miss the mark. Anything that puts you at a distance from God, and whatever puts you at a distance from God is written in the Bible. The Eastern perspective is evil is just ignorance of your true self. Your true self is love. And when you don't see that your true self is love, you're prone to doing something that's classified as ignorant and evil. And the conclusion that I'm coming to is that you come to the same set of rules that the Bible is advocating for through serious self-introspection. And it comes like a full circle. Like it's like the Bible is really nice to believe if you don't have the capacity for self-awareness, like I don't sometimes. Like I'll just read the Bible because that'll point to my human nature. And then I integrate that through meditation, through whatever Eastern spirituality is saying. And I'm like, I come back to the same thing that the Bible is saying. It's like a whole loop. That's the beautiful integration that you say, that you read the Bible first, take it literally, it doesn't make sense. You go to the Eastern perspective and you're like, oh wait, the Bible was saying the same thing. And then you continuously evolve.
Right. Yeah. Most of this stuff doesn't make sense when you try to apply it literally to reality, to life, where we are, right? I can't go out and stone my neighbor with rocks. I can't.
Gosh darn it.
Damn
I
it.
just can't. I shouldn't. I guess I could, but I shouldn't, just because something literally says something else. And And once you know, you can't unknow. Once you begin the path of introspection and confronting your humanity, it's difficult to take much of this literally, right? For me, I started off with philosophy. That's where it started for me. And then, of course, philosophy turned into all different kinds of things: magic, magical paths, Buddhism, Taoism, Christianity, obviously. Even though I was raised agnostic, like most people, I would think. Most of us probably agnostic at best, right? We never went to church and did any of that stuff, which is interesting because when you sit outside of those institutions, and they really are institutions, right? They have their rules, they have their dogmas, they have their things, which I'm not saying it's good or bad or indifferent. But what I'm saying is when you look at these things objectively and you're outside of those institutions, none of that makes sense. Because you get up in the morning, you do your routine, you go to work, you deal with all kinds of different people from every point in the human spectrum, right? And then you come home and you have to deal with your routine afterwards. But the key thing is everywhere you go, there you are. So you are injecting yourself into all of these different things and places. And if you sit outside these institutions, it's very difficult to understand how these strict rules apply to me or how they follow these when many of them, again, don't seem to make sense. That's why spirituality is more favored than religion. I have many close friends that some of them are pastors, and we have these conversations all the time where I say, well, this is nice, but why is it that I only hear a Christian pastor preaching from the Torah, basically, from the Old Testament, when from an objective perspective, I look at the Bible and say, well, yes, that is the history, but here's the new covenant, right? This is where things change. Christ fulfilled all this stuff. We don't even need to worry about most of that anymore. All the harsh judgments and all the hard things, right? But we still I still find them, the people inside these institutions, not breaking free from the literal practice of these words, which in a way for many of us, especially people who are agnostic, who understand God, understand the Bible to a point, but we don't apply that literally to our lives because I can't see where those things would work for me. And it's not that I'm being lazy, right? It's not that I'm trying to bypass doing good things. It just doesn't make sense in reality.
Yeah, that's one of the conclusions I'm coming through in this spiritual journey, which is that a lot of religion, at the meat of it, is a cultural identity, not really a search for God. It's like just like a father and son have a beer on a Sunday evening. You replace that with whatever religious ritual you want, and that becomes your cultural identity. It's nice, but it's culture, not spiritual. That's the point I'm coming to.
Yeah. And I find it hard to imagine that the great creating force of literally everything, every contradictive, every paradoxical thing in this universe that perfectly works together really cares that much about how different our cultures are. I think that's a us thing, right? Like, I think we did that.
Yeah, God gave us spirituality, and then the devil said, "Let me organize it for you."
That's great.
Yeah. I mean, light and shadow, light and dark. These are forces that work together.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just true. It's just, and as you said, you ascend past the dual thinking. But I think at least for me, that's the capacity that I can get to, is getting past the dualistic thinking. And that's where the ceiling is for me. Now it's just about, because I'm not sure I have the capacity to understand the mind, the mind of God, or the ineffable, whatever that ineffable is. I don't think that my vessel was designed to contain that in a conscious way. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
the ineffable works through me, right? It works through me, of course, and it works through all of us and all around us, and it binds us and it surrounds us and it connects us. But trying to conceptualize that into, this is the truth about whatever, I don't know if we're capable of that. And it's just better to surrender to the idea that, again, we just got to do what we can do and not worry about that part.
There's a story, a very ancient Indian sage is teaching his students, teaches them about the nature of God, everything, for hours and hours. And then at the end, he asks students, did you guys understand? And they're all saying, yeah, we understood. And he's like, damn it, I failed. If you say that you understand, you actually didn't understand.
Right.
Yeah, so it's like it points to the paradoxical nature. When you think you understand something, you're like, no.
So how has your work, from the point that you started this investigation into spirituality and into your own life, how has this changed you in your own practices and beliefs from when you started this conscious search till now? What big things have changed for you?
Ironically and paradoxically, became more ritualistic in my personal spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing I picked up. I'm like, it's nice to believe this abstract notion of God and to abandon all the dogma, but at the same time, I need to be grounded in my day-to-day practice. So, for example, chanting, I've picked that up. Uh, as silly as that sounds, I have a notebook where I write notes to God for whatever thing I'm struggling with or have gratitude for. That's really changed. So even though my idea of what I think God has kind of gone, I don't want to say gone above dogma, but instead of separated from dogma, I became in my own spiritual practice even more dogmatic because that gave me the grounding. It gave me that daily thing that I could look forward to. And that's forgetting all the documentary stuff. I think that's been the most rewarding thing for me, at least.
What do I always say to you, Michael? Better your own dogma than someone else's?
Yeah. And I gotta say, I noticed that was a big transition for me. I grew up very Christian, and as I made this transition, I've become a spiritual Christian. And I've always been one to pray, but the amount of spirituality, the amount of closeness to God and rituals I practice now is so much, there's so much more compared to what I used to do. I mean, I do things like meditation. I do even more prayer than I used to. I do different ceremonies. So, moon ceremonies. I'll go ahead and spend that time to try to get closer to God. There's just all these different practices that are now a part of my almost everyday life that have blossomed due to getting on this path. So I resonate with that a lot.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I learned about the Eucharist and like how the Catholics and the Orthodox have a different way of saying
Mm-hmm.
one group does this and the other group does this, the
Mm-hmm.
opposite. And I'm like, on the surface, forget all of the distinctions, but them trying to understand the nitty-gritty theological details. And they're like, every
Mm-hmm.
time I do this, now they understand the connection. It's not just a physical act. They understand the theology, regardless of whether it's right or wrong. It's like,
Exactly.
it adds that conviction. And I found that beautiful.
I don't think any of it's silly.
Yeah.
I don't think, I don't think it's silly that you chant, because look, ultimately, the goal of the mystic is to connect with God, to enter into relationship with. Just like to heal, we must enter into relationship with our shadows. We must enter into relationship with our emotions. We must enter into relationship with our body and our minds. It doesn't matter. No two couples enter into relationship the same way. No two couples sustain those relationships in the same way. Michael and his wife maintain their relationship the way that only those two can. My wife and I only the way that we can. So there is nothing silly. There is nothing right or wrong about how you or me or all of you connect to that light of creation, that creating body, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who or what they look like or what sex they are. None of that. All that only matters to you if that's how you enter into relationship with. Ultimately, that's really where that connection becomes strong. I can't sit here and say, I'd be lying if I said, nope, stop your chanting. That's wrong. Michael, you're praying wrong. Stop howling at the moon or whatever you do. Knock that crap off. That's not right. That's horse crap. It's right if that does that, then it's right. Right. But that's where all the conflict comes from.
Yeah. It's beautifully put.
Yeah, that's where we're fighting over the semantics of things, and I think that's so silly. But, you know, I'm a human being, so I get dragged into that crap too sometimes. You know, catch me on the wrong day. I'm just like full of piss and vinegar. And I'm like, no, oh, you want to fight? Let's fight. I'm the right way. You're the wrong way. Let's do it. Right. Those are human problems.
Yeah, it's
Those are
just humans want to fight.
sometimes, you know, but this is why we're down here to learn, and we're not up there having learned, if there ever is an end anyway, right?
Yeah.
So has your faith strengthened or softened in some way? Did you you started out in I guess we would just call it Orthodox Hinduism, where it's very right. Has your faith softened? Has your faith grown? Is it strengthened? Has it become more? Well, I guess I shouldn't say has it become more rigid, because obviously you've transcended into spirituality. Are there areas that you're still trying to work out to get closer?
Yeah, I was part of a Hindu sect that was very much Christian-like in terms of the way they
Mm,
thought. One real path, and this yogi that came in the 1800s who started this Hindu sect is the way to God.
mm,
And I still have the necklace that they made us wear.
mm,
Eventually, I broke out of that, and now it's for me. It's like I really want to investigate consciousness. I think that's like where for me maybe God is like it's like we all have this body mind, but there's a spirit that animates it that's like behind all that. And where did that come from? And because that seems like the line that kind of blends all every human. Every human has that spirit. And that spirit has no color, that spirit has no attributes. It's just like the electricity inside of a light bulb. And so that's where my exploration is going next. It's removing all the dogma and seeing like what is this consciousness that everybody has.
mm. What about friends and family over the years? Have you caught a lot of flack for going on these explorations into your connection and relationship with God?
Yeah, in the beginning, yeah, I got a little bit of flack when I went to the mosque to do a prayer. The
Mm,
same I went to the church, but the Hindu mind is kind of already used to pluralism, just because
hmm.
there's so many Hindu gods, and like
Yeah,
all I had to say is, look, just think of Christ as another Hindu god, and they're like, oh, okay, we kind of see where that's going. It's with my loving Christian friends that I have more trouble trying to make them understand that hey, there could be multiple paths.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, and I could be wrong, and I'm sure some scholar on YouTube is going to beat the crap out of me for this, but I think a lot of that comes from more ancient than Christianity, where the culture, the early cultures and stuff were fragmented because of the different gods, and caused a lot of problems and fighting, and it was easier to kind of get us all at least together without fighting over those things if we had just one God to worship, one God to kind of put our banner on, you know.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, that's when you think about like the religions that are really like have a very defined notion of God, the question I ask to those followers is like, yeah, you have a very defined notion of God, but the way that each one of those members of that religion relate to God is different. Like, right? Like, so in effect, the God is still different. Uh,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Michael, do you have any final questions before we wrap this up?
No, this has been a great conversation, though.
It really has.
Likewise, thank you.
Tell us, for those who are interested in knowing more about you and your work, tell them where they can find out more about you.
Yeah, Instagram, YouTube. It's called The Fire of Knowing. Just me on a spiritual journey. I get stuff wrong, I get stuff right. Just try to be as honest as possible.
I love that.
We'll have links in
That's
the
what we
show
all.
notes below.
Yep, there'll all be links to everything there. Did you have any parting words for our listeners and viewers today? Something you want them to leave with?
The one spiritual question I would pose is imagine you were born in a forest with no religious affiliation. How would you connect to this divinity that created you? And how would it be so much different than the religion that you believe now? And if you find similarities in those two, I think that's going to point you to the divine.
I love that.
Oh, well said. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you, my friend. We need to have more conversations. I want to keep up with the work you're doing and check in with you along the way. I want to thank you guys so much for joining us. check out our links, all the socials, the YouTubes, the TikToks, the what else, Michael? The Facebooks, the Instagrams, Spotify's.
Best website ever.
Best website ever. No offense. Best website ever. Ashla.com. And that's all we got for you today. So with love and gratitude, ad lucem.
Ad lucem.